Sometimes dead is better. That's the line Judd Crandall utters to Louis Creed in Stephen King's 1983 novel Pet Sematary and the two films it spawned. Would it have been better if Hollywood left this remake dead and buried? Let's find out in today's Horror Geek review. Welcome back, Gore Geeks. I'm Mike Bracken, better known as the Horror Geek. Are you tired of wasting your time on terrible horror movies? Then you've come to the right place. I'm here to guide you through the darkest corners of horror film history, helping you find great fright flicks and avoid a whole bunch of crap. If you enjoy this video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel for more horrific reviews and features, and click that annoying little bell button to get updates whenever I post new content. And now, with all that crap out of the way, let's get bloody. It's sort of fascinating to me that we're now on our second cinematic version of Pet Sematary, if for no other reason than because the films are based on a novel that horror author Stephen King originally refused to publish. When pressed about the book's history, King has told the story of how he wrote the novel, then showed it to his wife, Tabitha, and his friend and the Talisman co-author Peter Straub. Both immediately told him to lock it away in his writer's chest and throw away the key, because the book was just too dark to ever see the light of day. And that's what King did, for a few years anyway. But eventually he wound up submitting it to his publishers at Doubleday as the last book of his contract. Naturally, they jumped on the chance to publish another King book because King could literally publish his grocery list and sell a few million copies at this point. Director Mary Lambert helmed a 1989 adaptation of the novel, which was a pretty middle-of-the-road entry in the long list of King adaptations. It's not exactly The Shining or The Dead Zone, but it's not The Mangler either. Thank God, let us never speak of The Mangler again. After an even less impressive, and if we're being completely honest, totally unnecessary sequel, hey, someone had to keep Edward Furlong working after he blew through all that sweet Terminator 2 money, the series appeared to be dead. Until now. 2019 finds Dennis Widmyer and Kevin Kolsch taking a Pet Sematary screenplay and burying it out in the woods. And honestly, they should have probably just left that shit out there. Widmyer and Kolsch first caught genre fans' attention with Starry Eyes, their 2014 low-budget horror film that garnered loads of critical praise. Unfortunately, they don't really bring anything new or particularly interesting to the table here. But it's hard to blame them for that. This is a remake, after all. How many remakes, other than Carpenter's The Thing and Cronenberg's The Fly, ever really try to do anything new? Not many. The updated Pet Sematary hits all the notes fans of the novel and the first film expect, for the most part. There's one major plot change, that I'll not spoil here, and the film does have a different ending than either of the previous incarnations. But the rest of it? Pretty much what you'd expect. Jason Clarke, Amy Seimetz, and John Lithgow headline, and it's Lithgow who steals the show. The third Rock from the Sun actor tackles the role played by Fred Gwynne in the previous film. That means he's the guy who shows Louis the darkly ominous cemetery where things don't seem to stay buried. The cast does their best with the material, but Jeff Bueller's screenplay takes way too long to get rolling, dragging the first half of the film down with what feels like an endless series of expository scenes. The whole thing feels like a Pet Sematary for Dummies book, now with more ways to raise the dead! Except the concept of Pet Sematary isn't that complicated. In fact, it ain't complicated at all. Something dies, you bury it there, it comes back, but it comes back changed, and not in a good way. See? I just explained that shit in 5 seconds. Poor John Lithgow bears the burden of doling out all this exposition, but he makes the most of it. Without him, this film never even gets off the ground at all. Once the plot does finally shift into gear, things get a little more interesting. But Widmyer and Kolsch have to fight against not only the first half of the film's inertia, but the second half's predictability for anyone who's read or seen the earlier versions. They do manage to subvert some expectations, and the final act is better than anything that comes before it, like, for example, a subplot involving Amy Seimetz's character that goes pretty much nowhere, but it's hard to shake the feeling we've seen this all before. Because we have. Twice. Well, this probably sounds like I'm totally coming down on Pet Sematary. That's not entirely true. The film does have some spooky visuals. The ghost of Victor Pascal and the creepy masked kids taking dead animals to the pet cemetery stand out here, and the jump scares and gore set pieces elicited a lot of audience reaction in the theater where I watched it. So, some things work, and if you're totally new to the world of Pet Sematary, then you might actually find this outing at least somewhat enjoyable. It's just too bad that anything of merit is buried under that interminable first half. In the end,
there can be only one.
Pet Sematary is a perfect example of what Hollywood horror tends to look like these days. It's a competently helmed film that's professional and polished and is filled with decent enough performances and is entirely content to play it as safe and predictable as possible. Like the things that come back from the graveyard in this film, Pet Sematary looks pretty good on the outside, but if you dig deeper, you realize it doesn't have all that much soul.
Well, sometimes that is better.
Alright, knock it off, Fred Gwynn. We've all run that theme into the ground at this point. And there you have it, movie maniacs, my thoughts on Pet Sematary 2019. I've seen way worse horror films than this, and I imagine there will be people out there who actually enjoy it. But for me, it just takes way too long to get to anything good. In the pantheon of Stephen King adaptations, this one sits somewhere in the bottom middle of the pack. You could do better, but you could do a lot worse too. How's that for damning something with faint praise? If you enjoyed this video, give me a like, subscribe to the channel, and share it with other horror geeks out there in internet land. Oh, and be sure to check me out on social media. You know where the links are. They're down there below. Until next time, I'm Mike Bracken, aka the Horror Geek, reminding you that dead people have a knack for digging themselves out of their graves. This is why I'm pro-cremation. Who's scared of a pile of ashes? Not this guy, that's who.